Hi, my name is Judy Brown and I'm a licensed real estate broker in the state of Colorado. Today's video, I am going to discuss advanced homebuyer offer strategies. Now, these advanced offer strategies are for home buyers that are trying to compete in a dynamic and quickly moving real estate market. I need to note that I work in the Colorado real estate market. So these strategies are directly related to how our contracts are written and executed. So if you'd like a copy of our contracts, you can find them on the internet at the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies and simply search for real estate contracts. I will include a link in the comments of this video if you're interested in those. Okay, so these strategies are not intended to replace the advice of a licensed professional and experienced real estate broker. And also, some of the clauses I'm going to discuss need to be written by a licensed attorney. So these strategies are intended for home buyers who are willing to take some calculated risk. And this is intended to improve their chances of having their offers accepted by sellers in this very competitive real estate market. They're not for the faint of heart, and it may require that the buyer have some additional cash available to bring to the real estate transaction in order for these to successfully close. So let's go ahead and get started. First one is to make your earnest money non-refundable upon the contract being accepted. So in real estate vernacular, this is often referred to as having the earnest money go hard. So essentially what the buyer is telling the seller is that if I do not successfully close on this transaction, you, the seller, can keep my earnest money. It's as simple as that. Fairly straightforward. There are many opportunities in a real estate contract for a buyer to terminate the contract and get their earnest money returned. And in this strategy, you're saying that I intend to close on this contract and I'm willing to risk my earnest money deposit in order to assure you that I will close on this real estate transaction. Okay. Strategy number 2, you can limit inspection items. This is very commonplace in our real estate market and has been for several years. Essentially, you as the buyer, you agree to only object basically ask the sellers to fix certain issues if the problems are found to directly affect the health, the safety, the habitability, or insurability of the property. So some examples of this would be that the home needs new roof, that the heating system is non-functional, there are serious structural issues, the sewer line is collapsed, something along those lines. So you just say that you're telling the seller, look, we're not going to nickel and dime you to death, asking for everything under the sun to be repaired. And it's best to specifically list those items that you are reserving the right to object to. So again, you need the advice of a very experienced real estate broker. The next one is which is number 3, is to waive the inspection objection entirely. Now, this does not mean that you're waiving your right to an inspection. It simply says that you, the buyer, are going to have inspections completed, and if anything serious is found, you, the buyer, reserve the right to make a decision about how you're going to proceed once you have some details about the home inspection. So you'll either walk away and terminate the contract, or you'll continue the contract based on the knowledge that you have from the home inspection. The next one, and this is a very, very high risk one, is to waive the inspection completely. Now remember, if you are using a mortgage to finance the purchase of this property, you really can't use this strategy because, unless you know what you're doing, and the appraiser has some ability to put conditions on the appraisal that can sometimes prevent you from getting a mortgage unless certain things are done. I've seen this with roof replacements very often. Also, you have an potential insurability issue. So, certainly can be done if you have cash and unlimited cash and understand your risks. But this is not one that I recommend. It's very high risk, but it can be done. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of those clauses that should be written by an attorney. And this one is the escalation clause. So an escalation clause says that the buyer's purchase price in the offer will be increased by a specific amount over any competing offer up to a certain limit. So, for example, that might be written this way. The buyer's offer's purchase price will increase by $1,000 over any competing offer not to exceed a total purchase price of $500,000. So this clause is used in an attempt to not overpay for a home. However, it does reveal to the seller that the buyer does have the ability to qualify for a much higher purchase price, and it doesn't always achieve the desired result simply because it should be paired with the next strategy that I'm going to talk about that is much more complicated. I don't recommend escalation clauses. And as a agent representing a seller, I don't like escalation clauses at all, simply because they make, in a multiple offer situation, they make evaluating offers much more complicated, because very often it's not just the purchase price that is important in an offer. So it can just make things more confusing than they need to be. So I don't like them, and I prefer not to use them unless we have to, although they are fairly common in our real estate market right now. The next one is to offer appraisal gap coverage. Now, this is a very common strategy right now, but it can get very complicated, and you really need to thoroughly understand it before you decide to utilize this strategy. So, first of all, this clause assumes that the buyer is using a mortgage to purchase the property and that the buyer has additional funds that they can invest over and above the down payment and loan closing costs needed to close on the loan. So in this clause, the buyer is going to state that they are willing to bring a specific amount of additional cash to closing, if necessary, to cover any gap. That's where appraisal gap comes from. Any gap between the appraised value and the purchase price that they offered on their contract. So I want you to remember the reason that we offer this is because the amount that a lender will loan on the purchase of a home is based on the appraised value. They calculate their loan amount based on the appraised value, not the offered purchase price. So let's do an example to help you understand how this would play out. Let's say that the buyer offers a purchase price of $500,000, and in this clause they say that they are willing to pay up to an additional $15,000 to cover any gap between the appraised value and the offered purchase price. Okay? So that's the offer that's been made, and this is how it could potentially play out. So if the appraised value comes in at $485,000, then the final purchase price is $500,000, and the buyer must bring an additional $15,000 in cash to closing to cover the gap. So that's one way this could play out. Another way would be if the appraised value was $495,000, the final purchase price still $500,000, And in this scenario, the buyer must only bring an additional $5,000 in cash to closing to cover the gap. And then the last scenario that'll help you understand this is if the appraised value came in at $475,000, then the final purchase price would then be $490,000, and the buyer must bring an additional $15,000 in cash to cover the gap. However, the seller must also agree to reduce the purchase price to $490,000. So you can see where writing this clause appropriately to fully protect the buyer does require an attorney to help you with that wording. Okay, now we made it through that one. That's the most complicated. 7 is to waive the appraisal in its entirety. Now, if you're offering cash, it's a full cash offer, you're not getting a mortgage to purchase the property, then you should certainly be waiving appraisal, because otherwise your cash doesn't really bring any additional power. People think that it does, but here's the truth. I tell my sellers all the time, it's all cash to you. You don't care how they're paying as long as they can qualify for the loan or bring cash to closing. However, if you have a cash offer, then the appraisal does not matter. If the buyer wants to get one, they could, but the person who really needs that appraisal is the lender. So if you're going to offer cash, you should waive the appraisal without even a second thought. So when you're paying for appraisal gap coverage or waiving appraisal, you fully need to understand that you are potentially paying more for the home than it is worth on the open market. So we can debate that all day long, because obviously if there were multiple offers, then the market value should be whatever people are willing to offer. But that argument is for an entirely different discussion. Okay, so you can see that each of these strategies comes with a different level of risk. And if you choose one of these strategies, it's imperative that you fully understand and each strategy that you're going to use, and that you are willing to take any of the associated risks, because financially they can be fairly significant. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have about how to successfully use these strategies in your efforts to purchase a home in this competitive real estate market. Happy to help in whatever way I can. I will end this video with some contact information and my website, and I look forward to talking to you later. Have a great day. Bye.